Warren Buffett, he's the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway and a very rich man. How did he become rich? And most importantly, how can you become rich as well? Stay tuned to the video if you want to learn about Warren Buffett's advice for people who want to make big money in life.
I was fortunate in that respect because my dad paid for my education. If he hadn't, I probably wouldn't have become educated if I had to pay for it myself. But so I was able to save $10,000 by the time I was 21, and that was a huge head start. If I hadn't been able to do that, and my first child came along when I was 22, so I mean, the family, it's much easier to save it in those teenage years if you're lucky enough to be in a family where where your parents are taking care of your financial obligations. Every dollar then is worth making $10 or $20 later on. And so if you are interested in financial matters, getting a stake early is very useful, and getting knowledge early is very useful. Accumulating knowledge, that's one of the beauties of the business that Charlie and I are in, is that everything is cumulative. The stuff I learned when I was 20 is useful today. You're building a database in your mind that is going to pay off over time, but you have to have a little money to work with. So there's nothing like getting a few dollars ahead. Stay away from credit cards, and you can have a lot of fun if your mind goes along that track as you get older.
From this, we learn two important things. Number one, you need to have some money before you venture into any kind of investing or other businesses that you're thinking of. Now, don't worry if you're 21 or even whatever your current age is and you don't have $10,000 saved up yet. You can start today and still make it work. Do not pay that much attention to other people's timelines. It's one of the best things that I can tell you. You will just be making yourself miserable and you will not be productive. Now, the second important thing. You need to learn how the business you're going to dive into works, be it investing or social media marketing or whatever it is that you want to do. Investing in yourself, in your education, will be the best investment you will ever make. You must have heard this line: first you learn and then you earn. And it is true. Unless you know how a business model works, you will just be burning money, and that is something you want to avoid. As Warren Buffett said, you need to think of your mind as a database, and you need to input information into the database. If you want to learn about investing, there are some books that you can read to educate yourself on the topic. You will see a pop-up sometime later in the video, and you can click to watch the video to learn about the books that can help you get started. Also, it is very important before you start to invest into any kind of company that you know what your interests are. That might seem unimportant, but no, it isn't. When you go for things that you're interested in, you're more likely to stick to it and make it work, even if things do not go well in the beginning. If you want to invest in stocks, then you need to know what companies you're interested in. If you're a fan of Elon Musk, will you invest in Tesla, or do you like Microsoft? I suggest you take some time to figure out what your areas of interest are, and then you start researching the industries you want to invest in.
Wondering if you have any stock tips for any of the students. We're all trying to make a little living.
I bought a book in 1949 by a fellow named Ben Graham called The Intelligent Investor. I don't remember what I paid, but aside from what I paid for my 2 marriage licenses, that was the best investment I ever made. It's very important to have the right framework. You need to have an approach to investing that's sound. And Graham's approach is simple, but some people adopt to it, and which I did immediately, and most people don't. But if you have the right philosophy, you will find opportunities as you go through the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And frankly, you're most likely to find them when in periods like 5 years ago when we were having the panic. I mean, stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going into the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else because you won't need it. I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that. And when you don't find them, you don't do anything. So that's my generalized stock tip, no names.
That is a very famous question, which people seem to be asking successful investors all the time. Can you give me some stock tips? Getting advice to help you start your investing journey is good, but asking for stock tips is something you should not. No, you should never do. There's a simple reason for this. What works for somebody else might not work for you, and the same principle can be applied to stocks. Deciding whether a stock is good or bad is subjective. This decision can depend on many factors, such as what your investing strategy is and what your interests are. So, for you to be successful in the stock market, you need to figure out your investing strategy. Are you more of a passive investor or an active investor? And then you stick to the strategy you devise. This will help pick stocks which are good for you and will make sure that you're successful.
Most important thing is to be able to define which ones you can come to an intelligent decision on and which ones are beyond your capacity to evaluate. You don't have to be right about thousands and thousands of companies. You only have to be right about a couple. I met Bill Gates on July 5th, 1991. We were out in Seattle, and Bill said, "You've got to have a computer." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You can do your income tax on it." I said, "I don't have any income. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend." He said, "Well, you can keep track of your portfolio." And I said, "I only have one stock." I said, and he says, "It's going to change everything." And I said, "Well, will it change whether people chew gum?" And he said, "Well, probably not." And I said, "Well, will it change what kind of gum they chew?" And I said, "Well, then I'll stick to chewing gum and you stick to computers, you know." I don't have to understand all kinds of business. There's all kinds of business I don't understand. But there's thousands of opportunities there. I did understand the Bank of America, you know, and I'm able to do that. I'm able to understand some given percentage. But Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting. And in The Science of Hitting, he's got a diagram, shows him at the plate, and he's got the strike zone divided into 77 squares, each the size of a baseball. And he says, if I only swing at pitches in my sweet zone, which he shows there, and he has what his batting average would be, which is 400. If he had to swing at low outside pitches, but still in the strike zone, his average would be 230. He said the most important thing in hitting is waiting for the right pitch. Now, he was at a disadvantage because if the count was 0-2 or 1-2 or so on, even if that ball was down where he was only going to bat 230, he had to swing at it. All the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one.
Warren Buffett has just given an important piece of advice. You can rest assured you don't need to know everything to get started in investing. You just need to know your industry or company of interest, and then you wait for an opportunity when you get a fair price, and only then you buy a stock. Also, as mentioned previously at the beginning of the video, you should not be influenced by what people are doing in the stock market, and rather, you should stick to your investing strategy. And yes, you should also consider following the punch card system that Warren Buffett talked about. 20 punches on the card and 20 investing decisions are all you will need to make in your lifetime. This will indeed ensure that you too make wise investing decisions, because after all, 20 is not a lot, so you need to make sure you do your due diligence to be successful in your decision making when it comes to investing. To sum up, you always need to remember 5 things. Number 1, save some money before you invest into any business. Number 2, you need to know what your interests are. And number 3, you need to have an understanding of the business you're going to invest into. Number 4, do not go with the latest trends of what people are doing in the stock market, but instead do your own research and have an investment strategy in place. And finally, number 5, 20 punches are all you have to make all the investment decisions for your lifetime. With that, I hope you got great value from the video, and if you did, do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more information.